I will surrender my position as Empress. Chapter 6. Please tell me you are His Majesty's lover. From AudiNovel. Adele locked herself in her room and began to ponder her situation. How many individuals can I rely on? She couldn't trust anyone. Even the maids in the palace seemed unreliable. On the first day of her marriage, the ladies-in-waiting had not appeared surprised that the emperor had not shown up, as if they had already known he wouldn't be coming. Adele had no information on her new husband, Karl Ulrich Echmont, as the two countries of Kotrov and Echmont had not interacted with each other for a long time due to the deep and turbulent sea separating them. There was no reason to cross the ocean and target each other's territory, so the two nations did not go beyond recognizing each other's existence. Adele felt a heavy weight on her chest whenever she thought about the emperor, who was now officially her husband. She buried her face in her hands and tried to calm her mind by lying on the soft bed. I must first find out why Karl Ulrich selected the Princess of Kotrov as his empress, she muttered. Don't expect too much. Adele clenched her fists and ground her teeth in response to the thought. She dreaded that the aristocrats were already gossiping about her and spreading rumors. Additional news of interest would be added tomorrow morning. It was evident on the first day of the wedding how quickly word of the Empress's wedding would spread. It didn't matter if she was dismissed or refused the position, she would always be seen as the underdog in the rumors. Suddenly, a feeling of foreboding entered her mind as she thought about Diane Poitiers and the possibility that she was trying to prove something by visiting her. Adele's expression darkened at the thought, and she let out a sigh, muttering a curse under her breath that she hadn't uttered in a long time. Adele's foreboding turned out to be accurate as the emperor rushed to Diane's ivory palace after the wedding ceremony. The ladies-in-waiting rushed out before the emperor and bowed their heads. Is she asleep? Yes, Your Majesty. Karl entered Diane's bedroom with a frown, finding her lying on the bed, pale and sweating. His own eyes were sunken as if he had been through a lot of stress. He inhaled deeply as he heard a faint voice calling out to him. Karl, son. Hearing the sorrowful voice that could not be heard, the emperor clenched his teeth and tightly shut his eyes. He saw a massive bed with blonde hair on the pillows and a pale complexion. Diane looked as though she was about to break out in a cold sweat, her hands drenched with sweat. Your Majesty. Diane's faint voice brought Karl back to reality. When he opened his eyes, he saw Diane looking up at him with a hazy gaze as though she had just awoken. Karl quickly walked up to her and saw that she was focused on his attire. The fact that he was still wearing the same wedding dress made Diane purse her lips, as though she was stopping herself from smiling. She assumed that since he saw her collapse, the wedding must have been a complete disaster. Are you okay? Karl asked. Diane nodded slowly and spoke to Karl in a condescending tone. Did you arrive immediately after the wedding? Then, what shall we do, Your Majesty? Stop. I'm very sorry. It always irritates me. Diane hardly rose from her bed. You should go. The Empress will be waiting for you. I said I wouldn't go. Diane pursed her lips and sobbed at these words. I chose the wedding dress of the Empress, Your Majesty. I also selected the ceremonial crown for Her Majesty, she said, unaware that Adele had changed to a gold crown. As I selected all of the ceremony necessities and flowers, it felt as though my heart was being torn apart. Diane stood in front of the emperor, tears streaming down her face as she tried to stifle the tumultuous emotions roiling inside her. She knew she shouldn't let him out too much, shouldn't make him worry. But she couldn't hold them in any longer. As she cried, the emperor watched her, his expression one of concern but not agitation. After a long period of sobbing, Diane's tears finally began to subside. She stood there, staring at the Emperor's face, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The few remaining tears evaporated without a trace. Nothing will differ from the past. May I remain by the side of your Majesty? Diane asked, begging sincerely while holding his sleeve with a pitiful hand. Yes. But whom should I present to Her Majesty? Because she is the Empress, nobles will refer to me as her concubine. It seems that Diane is concerned about her status in the palace and how she will be perceived by others, particularly the Empress and the nobles. As a concubine to the Empress, she may not have the same level of respect or status as the Empress. A ripple appeared on the Emperor's previously calm face as he tilted his head and inquired, "Do you have a title in mind?" "Lover," Diane responded, her heart racing wildly. She was short of breath and even began to perspire. "Please inform the Empress that I am your lover." The Emperor stared at Diane for a long time with a confused expression, as if he did not know what she was thinking. And after some time, he responded with an odd tone, "I understand." When Diane's request was granted, she appeared astounded. A wolf cannot be tamed, but it can be provoked by touching its weak spot. Emperor Karl was a wolf-like man who concealed a raging fire. And Diane was aware of his vulnerabilities. She extended her hand to the Emperor and he grasped it. She reclined on her bed and shifted slightly to one side. "Please embrace me," Diane said with a longing expression. Karl hesitated for a moment before finally yielding to Diane's silent request. He slipped off his shoes and climbed onto the bed, pulling Diane into his arms. She nestled against his chest, feeling the gentle beating of his heart through the thick fabric of his robe. A small smile played across her lips as she finally achieved her goal of spending the night with the Emperor. "If I cannot become the Empress, no one else can assume that role in its entirety." The day after the wedding of the imperial couple, rumors spread like wildfire in a dry bush. As soon as the ceremony concluded, His Majesty departed for the Ivory Palace. So the Empress' wedding day was complicated. Yes. His Majesty arrived late to the wedding, correct. This is the first time this has ever occurred. Lady Poitiers nearly stole statues from the Elin Atelier recently. How much does a necklace cost in that country? Where did she obtain that money? It turned out to be a fascinating display. How is Her Majesty doing? She is a person whose facial expression rarely changes. Yesterday, she announced that she would not receive any visitors. However, that did not save face. Can she assume authority over the imperial palace? As the noble ladies chatted in small groups, one of them suddenly grabbed the arm of the one who was gossiping. "Why?" she asked, looking up at her friend with confusion. "Shush," the other woman hissed, looking around nervously and shaking her head slightly. The group fell silent, all of them looking around in surprise. One of the women bit her lower lip in shock as she saw the Empress strolling leisurely through the adjacent corridor. The noble ladies quickly greeted the Empress with polite bows and curtsies, and Adele received the greetings with grace before continuing on her way. The ladies watched her retreating back with trembling hands held tightly to their chests. "Did she listen?" one of the noble ladies asked, looking back at the Empress' retreating figure with a worried expression. The other women narrowed their eyes and tried to gauge the Empress' reaction to their conversation. However, all they could focus on were her golden eyes that seemed to capture their attention immediately. She did not express displeasure. Therefore, She must not have heard, one of the women concluded after a moment of hesitation. Are you sure? The women exchanged glances and nodded slowly. One of them sighed in relief. I must be mindful of my language, they added, looking shaken by the close call. So, even though she was insulted during the ceremony, she was the only one who did not flinch. Did you observe the utterance? You know, she reminds me of a black predator in the forest. Is it a panther? Yes. The panther. It was similar to observing a black panther. Oh. My God. Choose your words carefully. But honestly, if it's like this, do we need to investigate anything? It is not likely that she will have a family to support her. Don't you agree? Meanwhile, Adele walked past the noble ladies in the hallway with a hard, icy expression. As far as she could tell, she could not hear their whispers. However, their response was unequivocal. They were startled when she approached while they were talking behind her back. Adele was the only one who seemed to trigger this reaction, and all of the maids and servants she saw on her walk appeared normal. Adele's eyes narrowed as if she could see through their facade. Despite her inner turmoil, she continued on her walk, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. She couldn't help but wonder why every group she encountered had this same strange reaction. Adele returned to the Empress Palace, her body feeling the strain of yesterday's ominous forecast. Despite the chill in the wind and the sun's heat, she maintained a composed facade, only allowing herself to take deep breaths in the privacy of her empty room. Standing alone for a long time, Adele's face contorted as she buried her hands in her face, overwhelmed by the disparity between her expectations and the reality of the situation despite being well prepared for this journey. Nobody from Echmont's native country was brought here for any reason other than the Emperor's request, and Adele knew that all of these factors were significant to Kotrov. They had no reason to embark on this journey of exile, but Adele couldn't let herself be consumed by the past. She rubbed her chin determinedly and looked ahead, her golden eyes shining through her jet-black hair. It was time to move forward. You are intelligent, so as long as you are prudent, you will be fine. These were her mother's final words. Adele grinned self-deprecatingly as she remembered the voice. In the wedding traditions of Echmont, there is also a banquet. Due to the tradition of maintaining silence on the wedding day and the following day, a large banquet was held on the afternoon of the third day. On this day, the emperor and his wife held their wedding banquet, and the entire palace was filled with revelry. Diane Poitiers had been working on the banquet since early morning, as it was an extension of the wedding. As she surveyed the exquisitely decorated main hall, filled with brilliantly colored crystals and flowers, Diane couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her work. The main hall was magnificent, and the seats of the emperor and empress sat on the platform. Princess, is there an alternative solution? A lady's maid asked Diane politely. No. Diane replied, shaking her head. The ladies in waiting exchanged sharp glances and briefly distanced themselves from Diane. Diane focused on the Empress chair, a luxurious red carpet seat where one could sit alongside the Emperor and look down on everyone. Diane had worked hard to rise from the rank of Countess's daughter to the position of the Emperor's favorite. She had lost her parents to the witch beasts that poured out of the tower, but she had persevered and earned the Emperor's love and even the Ivory Palace. This was the domain of the Emperor, and everything in it was imperial property. Only one person could sit beside the Emperor as his equal, his wife, the Empress. But a person who was born a princess and automatically assumed her position should not be placed above her. Diane had asked the Emperor for the title of Empress, but he had remained silent and his eyes had hardened. She realized she could no longer beg him. As Diane watched the Empress enter the hall, her heart swelled with worry. She had confirmed the Emperor's love and even ruined the wedding of the Empress, but her anxiety remained. She took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. No. Relax, Diane Poitiers, she told herself, pressing down on her chest to calm her racing heart. The gaze of the people around him is what makes a king a king. This concludes the discussion. Diane repeated the words that cut her heart like a knife. She then regarded the two chairs at the head of the table. Today, the Empress shall not be able to sit comfortably in that chair. Weddings, first nights, and inaugural banquets, none of the main characters shall be the Empress. Instead, it will be Diane herself. Initially, it belonged to her. Hi. Want more? AudiNovel.